Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls online news video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we're going to be talking about a post on the forums that was made on November 13th by Rob Garrett from ZOS. And it goes over some of the changes that we're going to be seeing in Update 21 in the next update, actually, coming in February sometime. I know, how do I know it's February? Trust me, it's going to be February. But it says here, and I'm going to read the whole thing and then go over my thoughts on it. It says, "Hi all, I wanted to take a moment to share some info about how we're approaching combat updates in Update 21. As you all know, ESO is a massive game with a lot of moving parts. For years, the team has been aggressively adding and tweaking various components of combat in an effort to create a great experience for players of all varieties. Every game update includes a series of balance changes, and we regularly introduce new features such as Skill Advisor and Warden class. A tremendous amount of effort goes into delivering these updates, and while we do sometimes stumble along the way, we're pretty proud of what the team has accomplished. In recent months, however, we've recognized that we've been so focused on the next update that we haven't had much time to consider and flesh out what the next year plus of combat updates should look like. We often see posts on the forums requesting further context of balance changes and asking how they fit in the larger plan of vision of combat. While we do have a backlog of improvements identified for the game, it's clear we could do a better job of answering those kinds of inquiries, both the player community and ourselves, or for the player community and ourselves. To that effect, the team is currently investing a portion of its time into codifying, I wish it would have just said coding, our vision and long-term strategy for combat. This is no trivial task because, as mentioned before, the game is huge, and there's a lot to cover with combat. As such, we're pulling back on the volume of combat balance changes being introduced in Update 21 compared to previous updates. Currently, our planned changes for this update include... Now, I want to stop right there because I'm going to read each of these individually and give my thoughts. New item sets for Q1 2019, the DLC. This is Update 21. The next DLC is going to be including Update 21. New item sets. Okay, now I can understand why why they want to focus on new item sets. Item sets skew player results, and I say that because any set that they add to the game, depending on how it's built, like for example, you take Reliquant, has 2 pieces of crit, 5% damage to dungeon and trial monsters. It has the extra stam if you have the perfected, and then the 5-piece bonus, which is this thing that produces damage, extra damage each time you gain a stack. The more stacks you have, the more successful you keep stacks applied, the more damage it does. Now, you take a set like that and you compare it to something like Hunting's Rage, which gives you 2 crit, 1 stamina, and an extra weapon damage. It does not give you a proccing damage benefit. Are those 2 sets on equal ground? They're far from it. Now, if you take them and compare them singularly, damage-wise, they have comparable damage return. That means they do comparable damage. So I can understand their idea of wanting to focus on the idea of the sets and how they're playing into the game, because you don't want to add sets to the game that are going to be non-essential. If you guys haven't noticed, a lot of people say gear sets in the game have no use. For example, there's probably some 150 sets in the game that a lot of people say are useless in PvE, but are great in PvP. And then there's a bunch of sets that don't work in PvP, but work great in PvE. So again, the idea of them focusing on sets is a good idea. Because the more they balance the game with skills and all this kind of stuff, the less they're focusing on what sets can do in return. And they need to focus what sets can do. Because in my opinion, right now, Reliquin and Scoria need to be toned down even more, to be brought more in line with other sets. That means take the 5% bonus damage that you get from Scoria and stuff against dungeon and trial mobs, and then take that into account, because they supersede still other sets in the game. And they shouldn't. They should be balanced against other sets in the game. And I think that's what they're looking at. They're looking at a way to balance sets against other sets. Now, I'm not saying trial and dungeon sets shouldn't be more powerful. That's why they do. Those trial sets do have that 5% more damage against dungeon and trial mobs, is to make them more powerful in those settings. But when it's not a 5% increase in your damage, it's more like a 10 to 15% increase, then there's a problem. And right now, those sets actually grow your damage more than 5%. So, redesign for several PvP item sets that are currently rarely used. Okay, I understand this. There is a lot of sets in PvP that aren't being used, that need to be tuned for PvP. But if you're going to do a pass on just PvP sets, you need to do a pass on PvE sets. And I really hope in the next chapter, which will be coming after the Q1 DLC, we'll have that. We'll have that pass against gear sets in PvE. A balance on racial passive abilities. Alright, we'll get more to this one down below. A smaller number of other balance changes, many of which are wrapping up efforts the team took in Update 20. So, Murkmire, they did a lot of changes, and they realized that there is some of these that are not working appropriately, so they needed to go back in and adjust some stuff. I get it. There was some of these that are really... It would be really hard to kind of determine what effect they're going to have until they have long-term use. Now that they've had long-term use of these skills, and they're going to have more data they can collect, they can actually go back on it and say, hey, we're fixing this, and this is why. So this is a good thing. And an assortment of bug fixes. Let's hope they really focus on bug fixes, because there's a lot of bugs in the game that need to be fixed. For those that are complaining about lag issues and blaming the servers, blaming this, blaming that, a lot of it comes down to, and I hate to say it, 90% of the problems with lag and stuff is on the player's end. I hear people say, oh, well, I don't have this issue with this game, or this game, or this game. And actually, you might. You just don't realize it. Like, I have a friend who plays Overwatch religiously. But when he plays Destiny 2, he has the worst ever experience. Well, I asked him, I said, what kind of internet connection are you using? He tells me his internet connection. I said, okay, that's not the problem. I said, what about your ping to the servers? So he pinged the servers, not the issue. And I said, how do you have your internet at your house set up? And he says, oh, I have my computer wired to a wireless hub that then has a such and such gigahertz wireless connection to his modem. And I said, do me a favor, ping your modem. Not your router that you're going through, but your modem. He pinged his modem, and his modem was actually dropping off his signal. He was losing way more than he should have. And that was his problem. Was he was using a wireless connection because he had his computer in an upstairs room on the other side of the house from where his modem was located in his living room. So the signal had to travel through materials all the materials in his house to get there. That means electrical lines, gas pipes, anything like that. And all that stuff can skew your signal. So a lot of the times the internet isn't the issue. It's how you have your system set up. And playing wirelessly is probably the worst way you can play any online experience. It's better to hardwire stuff directly to the modem. So, just leaving that out there. But there is a lot of bugs that do cause some serious graphics lag and stuff, like AoEs. Like when you're in Cyrodiil and there's a lot of siege going on, that can cause a lot of lag, like graphics lag. Things like that. So I'm not saying that there isn't bugs or problems with it. I'm saying that there is. It's just a lot of times it's not what you think. So just getting that out of the way. Alright, moving on. We are currently, and I'm going to get back to this one because there's more on this below. We are currently in the process of sharing details of these changes with the class reps to get feedback ahead of the PTS. Now I'm going to pause right there again and let you guys in on a little secret. So now the class reps are under an NDA all the time with anything that deals with their program. So they're not allowed to discuss things they deal with the devs anymore until they have permission from the devs. At least that's what I'm to understand. And they will release some written stuff. They do this every so often anyways on the website, on the forums, saying what they're talking about with the devs. And a lot of times, it's really frustrating to see. I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, they are under an NDA now. They won't be able to discuss these kind of things. But I do see a problem with this. One of the top YouTubers for ESO is a class rep. And now I'm not saying this is a problem. I'm just gonna call this out as it is. He's also in one of the top guilds for running end game. You're basically giving the information on what's going to be best to do to the person that plays in the guild that does this stuff. Now, I'm not saying it's bad or that he'll share the information. I'm just saying that that's a fire waiting to happen, and it could be bad. So, on top of that, there are other people who are involved in the YouTube community and stuff that it can cause some issues. So, moving on. Okay, so which won't start until the new year. So they're not going to be dealing with the class reps until after the new year, which is in, guess what, January. And January is roughly about the time this is going to be going on to PTS, sometime in January. So my concern with this is it's not enough time to really get feedback from the community, not the class reps that are there to represent us, but for the class reps to get information back from the community on our thoughts on it. So again, I don't think this is a good idea. I think that's a really bad idea. However, we wanted to give you the heads up now so the smaller list of changes doesn't come as a surprise when the PTS 1 patch notes drop. In time, we'll also want to share more about the vision and strategy that will drive future combat updates. To be clear, this is simply a momentary declaration of changes while we evaluate the state of combat and determine how to proceed. We are nowhere near done updating or improving the game. You'll never be done. We all know that. I'm guessing many of you will be interested to know more about the racial balance changes. While we aren't ready to share specific details yet, here's a peek at the goals driving the team's efforts. Now I'm going to go through the whole list before I give my feedback. When selecting a race, players should have multiple effective options for any given gameplay role. The combat power provided by each race should be more equalized. Players should feel a stronger sense of power progression through racial passives as they level up. A unique feeling of flavor each race provides should be retained and enhanced where possible and remain faithful to the established lore. That's all the feedback. Or that's all for now. Feedback, as usual, is welcome. Alright, so There is a long list of replies. I'm not going to go through all this, but I do want to give my feedback here. When selecting a race, players should have multiple effective options in any given gameplay role. I agree to disagree. I agree that it's something that needs to happen, that we need to have options available to us in the roles we play, and each race should have its effective use in that. That is agreed. What I disagree on is if they go and add extra stats to each race. And I'll get to the reason why in a minute. The combat power provided by each race should be more equalized. 100%. But there's only two ways you can equalize it. You give each race, or all the races, the same stat bonus, like power bonus regardless, across the board, or you remove all stat bonuses completely. This is the only way you will balance the races and the classes. Because then it's just a matter of setup of gear, skills, and stats. Because as soon as you add any kind of thing that gives a race a power, any kind of power that is exponentially larger than others, like the Red Guard versus any other race. And I'm not talking about its adrenaline passive. I'm talking about its 10% stamina bonus. That right there makes the Red Guard the go-to. Now, I know Imperial also has 10%, but they also have 12% health. So as a stamina DPS, yeah, you could build them to be good stamina DPS, but that 12% health gives them more survivability, which actually puts them above the Red Guard in math terms. But when it comes to resource management, the Red Guard has 9% stam recovery. They also have the adrenaline passive, which is something the Imperial doesn't have. So again, a lot of this comes down to power management that they really need to focus on with the races. And this is where the next one comes into. The combat power provided by each race should be more equalized. Yes, each race should be equalized against other races. But if you give too much power to any one race, that will always become the go-to race. If you're trying to make it where races are balanced against each other, there is one of two ways to do it. One, you balance all the racial stats and benefits they get against each other. That means the adrenaline passive has to be tapered down. And it has to be tapered down to be more equivalent to a 10% total stamina return. So that means you'd have to reduce the stamina recovery to 6%, and you'd have to change the return on the Red Guard's passive to roughly, my guess is like 600 and something on adrenaline. This way, the adrenaline passive and the recovery tapers out to be more equalized to somebody with a 10% stam recovery. So that means, yes, even the Wood Elves, 21% stam recovery would have to be toned down to be more in line. Right now, the Red Guard and Wood Elf have about the same recovery rate. If you build a Wood Elf for stam recovery versus the Red Guard's racial passive, they actually are equalized. But then you throw the Khajiit in there, and it can't reach the standards. It can't reach the resource management that a Red Guard and a Wood Elf can. So I'm just using those as tools, by the way, as descriptionary things. So yes, the races definitely need balance, big time, because it's the races that are skewing some of our character build designs. And I'm sorry, but a lot of the community wants to play a lot more races than the Red Guard, the High Elf, and the Argonian. So yeah, that's definitely something that should happen. Players should feel stronger sense of power progression through racial passives as they level up. Defined stronger. Because there's one of two ways they could do this. They can either pull from the passives that we get from CP, which is 20% across the board on all three stats, stamina, magic, and health, or they add CP to the leveling process. Now, I know a lot of you are going, what do you mean by that? That means every time you level one level of your character, you gain 1 CP, no matter what, from level 1 to 50. So by the time you hit 50, you have 50 CP. And in fact, you can even incorporate it to where by the time they hit level 50, they have 160 CP. So this way, you can do away with a lot of the crafting elements in the game, because right now, that is another issue I will get into, is the gear system. It goes up to CP 160. If you have a character between 50 and 160, that gear gap in there, like any of the gear in between there, all those materials became 100% useless. Unless you have a new player in your guild that's starting a new character and leveling through that process, you can use level 50 gear to CP 160. Like, you don't even need the CP gear in between. So it's kind of like, again, the power progression of the racials plays into the power progression of the gear, into the power progression of the traits and Mundus Stone, to anything that has any kind of power progression. Yes, race does need to have some feeling that we are getting something from it as we progress our character. But how much power you give them is going to be the problem. Because you're either going to have to take away from the CP element of that 20% stat increase, and lower it to like 10% and add that 10% to the race in some way, or you've got to find another way of fixing it. And this is why our characters, like the leveling system, is so skewed right now. Is because you've got to level to 50 to start gaining CP. Then you got to level to 160, which doesn't take long. It takes about as long as it does to go from 1 to 20. If that. Like maybe 1 to 16. And then once you get that 160 CP, like, then you can wear the best gear. But it's beyond that. It's CP 300, where the stat bonus you get from it, the power growth of your character's stats, ends. It doesn't stop your power growth, because you still gain CP up to 810, where we are right now. You know, you got to remember, in the next update, we're going to 840. So we're going to get another 30 CP added to our characters, 10 for each tree. This is going to skew those numbers even higher. So, if they balance the races with too much power, our characters will be well overpowered for the next DLC, to where it will be cakewalk. The devs will not be able to make it hard enough. So this has to be a really fine balance pass, and there has to be a lot of backtesting. This is not something you're going to put on PTS for 5 weeks and then say, okay, it's good. This is something you got to put on PTS and have up for at least a couple months. Because you're talking about redefining how races play into the game and how their power is applied to the overall build. That means the Mundus Stones you use, the glyphs you enchant your armor with and your weapons with, the traits you use on your gear, all that stuff. This all plays into that. So, racial progression, character progression, gear progression, and CP progression are all power progression to our characters. If you do not focus on all of that at once, you're going to have a really overpowered character if you do it wrong. And that's what my fear is right now. Now, it says a unique feeling and flavor each race provides should retain and enhance where possible and remain faithful to the established lore. 100%. 100% agree with this. And one of the biggest reasons why ESO is not liked by a mass majority of the Elder Scrolls community is because they took Elder Scrolls and they tried to make it an MMO. Now that it seems like they're reverting back and trying to make it an Elder Scrolls game with an MMO element. And that's biting them in the butt. It's biting them in the butt because Elder Scrolls was never designed to be a online massive multiplayer game. It was designed to be a single player game, and a lot of us were hoping that later down the road they would add a cooperative game mode, like where you could play together with your friends. Like if I wanted to play with my brother-in-law, I could be like, hey dude, let's go play Elder Scrolls Skyrim together. Oh, hey, let me get my counterpart and your counterpart involved and we can all play together. Up to 4 people. Cooperative gameplay. Very much like, you know, Borderlands. But in a fantasy setting. That's what a lot of us wanted. But that's not what we got. We got Elder Scrolls Online, where it originally was designed to be a World of Warcraft clone, which I hate to use that term, but it was originally designed to be that way with action combat. And then they realized that they weren't reaching the fan base. They weren't reaching the community that they made the game for, which was the fans of Elder Scrolls. Now, they made it for online community fans too, and they tried to find a good balance. Now, did they find it? I think with one Tamriel, they hit the nail on the head. I think since then, there's too much power progression, which makes the world feel unscary. You know, it has no challenge behind it. It has no difficulty. Unlike other Elder Scrolls games, where even you have to reach a pretty high level, usually about 20 or 30 in other Elder Scrolls games, to feel like you're overpowered. And even then, you have to have everything maxed out to feel really overpowered. We're beyond that well overpowered part in this game. And that's why a lot of us at high CP feel like the overland content is a joke. I think during Murkmire, like the whole questing experience, doing the delves, world bosses, all that stuff and the quests, I think out of the whole time with my main character, I died one time, and that was because I ran into an area and left my character and walked away to do something, came back, and they were dead. And that was it. That was the only time my character died. Because the content was too easy. Because our characters are overpowered for it. If you're a new player coming into the game, man, this game has the content you want. But if you're an experienced veteran player in this game, the only content that is challenging for you, or is going to be challenging for you in a lot of ways, is the dungeons and trials and PvP. Other than that, a lot of the content's just Candyland. Now, I will admit, there are some issues with tanks in Overland, that's for sure. I mean, I don't like to spend like an hour doing a quest that my Sork DPS just finished in like 20 minutes. Or less. Heck, I can play through the whole game with a brand new character because I have 810 CP to me. I can play through the whole game from 1 to 50 and then get to CP 160 in like 12 hours total. Versus a new player, who I've experienced this with, a new player from 1 to 50. This person had hardships along the way. Even though we helped them, my guild helped them, getting them gear and all kinds of stuff, they still had trouble along the way because they didn't have the power I had. They didn't have all their racial passives, skill passives, all their CP passives. This is why the CP system needs to be changed. CP players are overpowered. When the average player starts with anywhere between 7 to 10k in stats without any gear, to the CP player who starts with 12 to 15k in all their stats, there is a problem. Because now you add in all the stat bonuses and everything else, they get 20% stam, health, and magicka to start. No other newbie gets that, but us veteran players do. See, I don't mind that they want to do this. I really don't. I could go on, but I'm going to try and hold my self back on this. So the devs are doing a good job so far, in my opinion, with what they've done to the game. Adding new gear sets, it really improves the diversity and structure that we have to build our characters so we can do in-game content and build our way into in-game, like dungeons and trial sets and all that. They've done a great job with that. They've done a great job of giving us the tools necessary to reach that point. But eventually, a lot of that stuff is going to become obsolete and useless. Because somebody's going to find something that's going to be the best setup. And it happens every update. We find the best builds to release to the community, and the people eat these things up. And people go, oh wow, I can do this, and I'm going to be the best tank in the game. I can do this and be the best DPS in the game. And then once they get there, they realize that, hey, I've got 3 months of sitting on my butt with nothing to do because I've got the best stuff in the game. I have no progression beyond, character progression. And that's the way an MMO should be. It should be all about character progression, and it shouldn't be driven by gear progression. If you want gear progression, go play not World of Warcraft, go play Diablo. Because that game is designed for that. Gear power progression. And a massive multiplayer online game shouldn't be all about gear. Gear should be a very small percentage of your power progression. Your character progression should be the main long term. So unless they decide to add more skill lines to the game with DLCs and chapters, our character progression is very limited right now. Because we only have our class skills to learn and passives, the weapons of choice that we choose to use, and the gear of choice. Then we have some world skills, we have some guild skills, we have that stuff. But it's very simple to fill that out to what we need to be perfect at our roles. It's not hard. In fact, you don't even need all the skill points in the game. Most of the time, you need about 120 to get your skills lined out. And that's 120 if you're doing crafting with it. And not even max crafting. That means just having the ability to upgrade your gear without having to switch to a new character to upgrade that gear. That's it. It takes like 120 something skill points. You can get 90 by the time you hit CP 160. Or 200, 200 skill points by the time you get there. Because if you just play the quests that give you CP, and you do the sky shards, in every zone along the way, you can have 200 skill points by the time you reach that point. Because there's so many skill points in this game now available to us that it's kind of, again, it comes down to the long term. If you're looking at the game for long term power progression, reaching power progression is easy. Long term power progression, where you unlock more abilities, you unlock more skills that are available to you, you actually look at the full spectrum of the game, then there's a lot more to the game than expected. But a lot of people don't do that. They only look at what's there and available to them from the get-go. And people, of course, always take the path of least resistance. They'll look online, find a build they like, use it, they'll build their character to that, and then guess what? Next update, all they have to do is change out their gears, adjust their stats and stuff, boom, they're done, set, and ready to go. Might take a couple weeks. Might. But then once they reach that point again, boom, done. You need some kind of progression for your characters to strive for. Things that you want them reaching for. Gear isn't one of them. Gear should never be one of them. It should always be the character's power progression and their ability to progress their character, the character itself, not the gear. The gear should play a small part in that power progression. But yeah, that's all I have to say. So I do like this change, and I do hope the devs are listening to the community and not just the class reps. I hope that they understand, and the class reps need to understand this too. Not everyone visits the forums or Discord. Those that do really don't like having like 20 Discords. Like myself, I already have like 8. I had like 12. I got rid of a bunch of them because I couldn't handle all the freaking random messages that kept popping up. I had to turn it all off. And a lot of that I couldn't turn off, so I had to delete the channels altogether. So yeah, there is some issues with things and stuff like that. But I do think if the class reps really want to get in touch with people, they need to find other means than using the forums and Reddit and their Discords. They need to get in the game. They need to listen to the players. They need to ask questions from the players. And the devs need to do the same thing. The devs need to continue with their questionnaires that they send out to players to get feedback. They need to get feedback from their game data, seeing what people are using gear-wise, and seeing what things are being used more often than others. And they need to make adjustments to those things so that more skills become available and are widely used instead of just select skills. And this is where a lot of the problem in this game lies right now, is there's not enough reason to take other things when certain things are overpowering them. Like, why have over 30 gear sets for trials when only like 2 gear sets from trials, 3 gear sets from trials is being used? And I ain't talking about Maelstrom Arena or Arena gear. I'm talking about actual trial gear, 12-man trial gear. 3 or 4 sets total out of like 50 are being used. Why? Why isn't it more? But yeah, this does come down, and there's a lot of things they do need to look at. Like, they need to look at the Master Maelstrom weapons, because you can't get those in perfect and imperfect like you can other things. They need to look at the older trial sets that don't have a imperfect version. Because those older trials, yeah, they might not be as hard or as difficult as the newer trials, but they have just as much in them and more than the newer trials. A lot of the newer trials are mini trials. The original trials are the hardcore trials. Those things need to reward you, whether you're playing it in normal or in veteran. And that's the thing a lot of people are misunderstanding about this game. And I don't think it's the community so much as it is the devs. The devs aren't understanding why the community's fighting back on that, is because they want to be rewarded for what they do. When you can run a simple thing like Black Rose Prison on normal, which on normal it's a joke, and get an imperfect weapon, and then you can run Asylum Sanctorum, run the whole thing on normal, and get an imperfect Asylum weapon. You can run any trial and get imperfect trial gear. That's pretty damn good compared to some of the other gear sets that you can get from other trials, which do not have perfect and imperfect. That's where the problem lies. I think they need to do a pass on all gear. This right here is something that, these two right here is something you really need to look at for the whole aspect of the game. Not just one area. And not just new sets or PvP sets, but all sets. They need to put their hands on every single one of them. But yeah, I could go on, guys. I really could. I could just keep going on. But I will say this. If you think I sound negative about the game, I'm not. I want to see this game improve and become better. I do have a passion for this game, and I'm not saying like I love the, like I'm like, you know, mating with the game or anything. No. What I'm saying is I love this game. It's a great game, but it has a lot of things that can deter you from really enjoying it because of the way certain things are set up and how character progression is right now. We need long-term character progression. The CP system gives us long-term, but it's capped. I think what they need to do is just remove the cap and let people build to 100 CP in each tree, or 100 CP in each star. Those people who already have the CP and can build to 100 in each star, let them. Are they going to be overpowered for people? Yep, that's when you make PvP no CP whatsoever. All PvP is no CP. PvE, on the other hand, who cares? But you also need to adjust PvE and have content in PvE, not just dungeons and trials, but content, open world content that is there for high level people. You need to add another Craglorn. In fact, we need 3 of those. We need we need a Craglorn, we need another place like Craglorn in the other factions. So that way there is some challenging group content for high level people that is mixed between solo play, like for the story, and then a lot of group content in there that the players can play through. And reward us for that. Give us new trials, new things like that to experience. Give us some new dungeons. And quit putting dungeons only in the base game content. Add dungeons to new content as well. If somebody doesn't have access to that zone, they can still use the dungeon finder to go there and play those dungeons. But when they leave, it just teleports them back to where they were. Like, that is something you need to do. There's a lot of things that I feel need to be done to make the game better. But as a personal player, not as a person who works for the company, I have no real say. I don't know what their vision is for the game. I have my idea on what their vision of the game is, and it is completely different from that of most players. So, but yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to give my insight and my thoughts on this, because I do feel it's important for players to speak their mind, to give their feedback. Whether we do it on a YouTube video or we do it live on there and post a forum post, whatever, we need to give our feedback. We need to let the company know, hey, we're fans of your game, but we feel there are some problems. And these are our thoughts about those problems. What I would really like to see them do is to really diversify this game. Allow more races to be viable for all roles. Allow more classes to be viable at all roles. Do I want them all singularized so all classes feel the same when you're playing them? No, we already have that. It's called the meta. If I want to feel like I'm playing the same thing on any class, I'll just play the meta. Because that's how it feels. I made a Nightblade. I have a Nightblade, max level Nightblade. I made a healer. Now, the healer plays differently a little bit than the Templar, but it feels the same. It feels like I'm playing the same build, just in a different skin. Because of the skills. These skills are the only thing that's different. And it's because of the class skills. But I'm using the exact same skills with the weapons I'm using, because I'm using a Lightning Staff, Resto Staff. And it feels identical. It might not be identical, but it feels that way. When I play Stamina DPS and I'm playing... Now, if I'm playing a DK versus like a Nightblade in DPS, Stam DPS, it plays differently, but it feels the same. Same rotation, same everything. And it's like, wow, am I even playing the same game as everybody else? And that's what I mean by diversifying. This game needs a lot of diversity in it. Because it's an Elder Scrolls game. All Elder Scrolls games are very diverse games. And when you make an online version and try to make it like everything's the same, that's when you're killing your own game. Now, I am glad that every race or every class can play Magicka and Stamina DPS. I'm glad that they can play tanks and healers, but they need to be on more equal ground. That doesn't mean to give them all the same exact skill layout. I don't want that. I want the Templar tank to be as effective as the DK tank. I want a Sork to be as effective as a Sork healer to be as effective as a Templar healer. When I mean effective, that means they are just as good, they just bring different tools to the table. Instead of relying on, oh, Templar's the best healer, DK's the best tank, Nightblade's the best DPS, with a Sork coming up second. And the Warden has no place in the game whatsoever. But even though they do, and I know what the devs are trying to do, like, I have my own idea of what they're trying to do, but it's not happening. Now, do I have a problem with a meta? No, I don't. But the meta needs to be bigger. It needs to be a lot more broader. And not so focused in on one idea fits all. So yeah. I think the game needs more. A lot more. But that's just my opinion. Am I going to quit the game? No, I'm going to continue playing it. I'm going to continue fighting for something I like. And that's it. So keep up the work, guys. You guys are heading in my opinion, you're heading in the right direction. It's just going to take you a lot longer because you didn't have an idea to begin with, it seemed like. Like, you guys started going in different ideas. You started with the idea of, hey, we want this to be like a World of Warcraft regression game, and then dropped that and went for a more Elder Scrolls progression, and then realized that that wasn't working, and now are like, okay, we gotta come up with a new idea, and we gotta find that focus. But you're still sticking to your guns is in the idea that this game can be played how you want. You need to focus on that. You need to make it to where that is possible. And this includes adding light armor tanks, medium armor tanks, heavy armor tanks, and the healers as well. There needs to be Magicka healers, stamina healers, and heavy armor healers. There needs to be healers for all roles, and in all gear types. That's a given. I would like to see them focus on those things. So, but that's it for the video, guys. Hope you guys liked it. I know I went into a rant. I can't explain why yet, but I'm getting there. But yeah, that's it. So if you like the video, hit the like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching, and until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.